that we're talking about data protection. We do have the commissioner on, but I have two things to share before we do. So we have our normal trivia question. And our trivia question for today asks, which section of the Data Protection Act creates the Office of the Information Commissioner? So which section of the Data Protection Act creates the Office of the Information Commissioner? You can respond by sending a WhatsApp to 2397583. I'm not currently seeing our YouTube live, but I think it will be back up shortly. You can also respond in the live YouTube chat, and the winner will be reached out to. We also have a I forgot to mention, my producer just reminded me, it is not the usual prize this week. You'll be getting a different kind of voucher that will require an in-person pickup, so keep that in mind when you are responding. We also have a Did You Know for this week, and this week we are looking at the data protection standards. So there are 8 data protection standards. They are fairness and lawfulness, and this means that your data must be processed in a way that is not deceiving, that they didn't receive your data by getting misleading information or from any misleading interaction. 2, purpose limitation. So that means that your personal data should only be used for the specific reason that it was obtained. 3, data minimization. So you should get as much data as you need, but only to limit it to the purpose of what you're getting the data for. So you shouldn't get more data than is necessary for the process. Accuracy, that your data is to be kept accurate, that if there are changes to your data, you are allowed to make those changes or apply for those changes to be made to your records. Storage limitation, so the data should not be kept for longer than is necessary. I know there's a time period under the Act, and we can ask the Commissioner to speak to that as to when your records are to be destroyed after processing. There are rights available to the data subject, which we're going to talk to the Commissioner about what exactly those rights are. So I'm not going to preempt her. There is the implementation of technical and organizational measures, and this means that as a data controller, you are to have in your organization processes that comply with the regulations under the Data Protection Act and allow for the legal and fair processing of people's personal data. And finally, cross-border transfers. So that is to be something that is limited, that personal data should not be transferred outside of the state of Jamaica unless there is an adequate level of protection to ensure that the data is properly encrypted and is not tampered with in that transfer. So those are your 8 data protection standards, and we will go straight into our break.
So Commissioner, please just stay with us for a few. We're just going to take the break and then we pick up.
Has once again come for Jamaicans to return to the polls in a general election. In the race to 32, several issues will be on the minds of Jamaicans as they make their way to the polling stations across the country. Whether at the national or community level, it will all come down to what happens inside the ballot box. Nationwide 90 FM is your best source for credible, accurate, reliable, and engaging political analysis of all the key battleground seats. Join Cliff Hughes every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 7 p.m. in Nationwide at 5 for Inside the Ballot Box, leading up to Election Day, September 3. Repeated every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at 8:10 a.m. in Nationwide this morning. It's the political history class, Inside the Ballot Box, only on Nationwide Radio, Nationwide YouTube, and NationwideRadioJM.com. The new revolution in media.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are discussing your right to privacy and the Data Protection Act. We are joined by Information Commissioner Miss Celia Barclay. Are you with us?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I think we can start out pretty basic. We said that the Data Protection Act protects, your personal data. So for those of us who don't know what personal data is, and for those of us who don't know what exactly that protection looks like, could you just break that down for us?
All right. So because we're talking to the general public, I am going to try to use some very simple terms that everyone would be familiar with. So when we talk about personal data under the Data Protection Act, we are talking about that information that is personal, specific, and unique to an individual, but also that allows that individual to be identified by other persons. So it is those two factors that come together to form personal data that is protected by the Act. So we know as persons we have a lot of things that are personal or private to us or that we would like people to keep in confidence. It is not everything that is protected by the Act. As I like to say, it doesn't cover all of your personal business. But that type of information that somebody can use to specifically identify you as John Brown or you as Jane Doe is what is protected. So whether that is your name, your address, which is a very specific location that maybe only you live or that somebody might know you and others live, it could be something like your, in the technological age, your IP address that is linked to your computer and can be used to identify you as a user. It can be in the context of, National Goods and Services, your TRN number, those things. All that can specifically pinpoint you, the individual, and distinguish you from others is what is considered your personal data. And then we have a special subset now that is called sensitive personal data, which is still personal data, but it is treated a little differently because it may place persons at a little higher risk. It is more sensitive, and that can include things, for example, like your religious, political, or philosophical affiliations. It can include things such as your gender, sexual identity and preferences. It includes things like your health information. These are called sensitive personal data, and a special level of protection is expected to be given to those because of the implications that it might have if those data get out into the public and is wrongly used.
And that extra protection, Commissioner, would perhaps include encryption. What exactly would that mean?
Right. So if, for example, let us say you just have a guest list with person's name on it.
Yes.
And that's all there is to it. Depending on who you are and where that list is stored, it might be sufficient for you to lock it away in a filing cabinet.
Yes.
But if you have, for example, person's health information, then simply putting it away in a desk drawer cabinet may not be sufficient. They're going to ask things like, from a physical perspective, how is it locked away? How is access to that cabinet limited? Who has access? What are the controls in place to make sure only those persons can access? How often is it checked? You mentioned encryption. This is where now you go to the technological or electronic methods of protecting and securing personal data. So yes, encryption is one. You also have other things like multi-factor authentication, so that you're not just using a password to get onto the computer, into the system that stores this information. You may be using a password that once you enter it, it's also going to be sending a notification to your email that you now need to either click a link or you get a code that you have to access. So there are 2 or 3 layers of security that you have to go through in order to access this information. If it's on a system, you might also want to add things like your virus protection, your spyware, so that you can know if your system is vulnerable and being hacked. Certain organizational measures might include how often, for example, you do your security testing to ensure that what you have in place is current, is up to date, is still effective. Because as you know, technology changes very quickly, and attacks and threats that you did not have a year ago exist today. By tomorrow, next week, there are new threats. So you have to keep things like your protection up to date if you want to see, well, you're properly taking care of this information.
Yes. And to our listeners, again, this great and very critical legislation came into effect December 2023 after it was passed in 2020. Commissioner, can you explain who is a data subject and what are the rights a data subject has under the legislation?
I like to say you, me, all are we. Because a data subject is every individual. The law gives everybody that right to privacy and protection of personal information. So it is your official people and your unofficial people. Your regular members of the public, regardless of class, gender, race, stature, they're all protected under this act, because the act was passed to ensure that Jamaican people are not exploited and made vulnerable to certain risks. So it does offer protection to everyone alive, but it goes even further by offering protection as well, even to individuals who have passed. Because you know how it is sometimes, you know, we have our friends or family who have left us, and all of a sudden all sorts of information is available or comes out, and people can use it in various ways, which might not be in the interest of the estate, being the persons, the beneficiaries, and others that have survived the decease. But sometimes it might not even be in the interest of the deceased, because it can go to the person's reputational integrity as well. So persons who have died within the past 30 years are also protected under this legislation.
Yes. What are some
right?
Yeah.
Right. So you had asked about that. What the act does is to try to remove this cloudiness or this shroud that is around how what we call data controllers treat with personal data. Now, your data controllers are those individuals that are, the act uses the word processing, but I like to say have, hold, and use, because it makes it more relatable to individuals. So persons that you are doing any kind of business with, whether it is a for-profit or a not-for-profit business, whether this is private sector, public sector, a registered entity, or unregistered entity, it doesn't really matter. Those persons or organizations that are utilizing your personal data, this identifiable information, in order to offer you some kind of product or service, are all data controllers. And the Act gives us certain rights against them.
Yes.
So they have your data, they're using it. You, first of all, have the right of access to information relating to the processing of that data. Now, this is to be distinguished from the access to information under the Access to Information Act.
Yes.
Here we're talking about access to information relating to how these persons and entities, the data controllers, are collecting, using, storing, transferring, or otherwise manipulating the personal information that they have. You can make inquiries, you can ask, and you have the right to be told, why do you want this? What are you using it for? What purpose is being served by this? How are you using it? Who do you pass it to? Who is helping you to process it? You also have the right to what we call rectification, which is essentially to ensure that the information that they have on you, it is up to date, complete, and accurate.
Yes.
Because remember, persons are using this information to make decisions about you. So let us give a very relatable example. We have bank accounts. You go into the bank, you are applying for different services, whether this is a loan or a credit card or anything. They're going to be using the information on their system to make a decision as to whether you get this service, how best to provide the service, your qualification requirements, all these things. You would not want a situation where, let us say you're applying for a loan to buy a car.
Yes.
And the information that they have on you is from 5 years ago and might not properly represent who you are, what you do right now. Then it wouldn't be fair for them to make a decision and, for example, decline the loan on that basis.
Yes.
So you have the right to ensure that the information they have is accurate, and in order to do so, once you make your request, you get the access. You can see exactly what information they hold. You can now demand that any information that is not correct, not complete, not clear, be corrected and otherwise remedied.
Yes.
You also have rights in terms of how they can use your personal data. Now, there might be persons who may be processing your data in a way that you don't support, you don't like, and so you can, in certain circumstances, ask that they stop processing your data altogether, or that they stop processing it in a certain way or for a certain purpose. Mm-hmm. Now, a good example of this that many persons may experience, you go somewhere, for example, a new supermarket, they invite you to sign up for membership, and you do, because they tell you, you get these benefits, you can get discounts, you can get cash back. So you fill out a form and you give them all this personal information because you just want the benefits. All you're looking for is a little cash back. Mm-hmm. But then your email starts getting bombarded every time they have a new product. They send it to you. We have this on sale. We have this on offer. Introducing this. You might not want that marketing email.
Yes.
And a lot of persons are saying, but I never signed up for this. All I wanted was some cash back. Why am I receiving this? You have the right to opt in or opt out of different types of uses of your personal information for different purposes. In certain circumstances. So that's one example of where you can withdraw your consent with respect to a particular use of your information, even while still dealing with that data controller.
Yes.
The other right that persons have is, for example, to have their data transferred from one data controller to another. Now, we talk about how difficult sometimes it can be to do business in Jamaica, and we've seen where various steps have been taken to make doing business easier. One of the things that persons always complain about is, all right, I go to this entity and I give them so much information, and I go to another similar entity, let us say I'm moving from one to the next, and they're asking me for the same thing. Why do I have to give this all over again? Well, under the Data Protection Act, you do have the right to request that personal data that is held in the custody and control and being processed by a data controller be moved or transferred from that data controller in usable format to another controller if you so request. Now, please bear in mind that because persons keep data and process it in different ways, there may be some challenges in facilitating that request, or there can also be, depending on how technical the system is, cost associated with that request for transfer. So persons can impose a cost if you ask for that service, but it doesn't mean you don't have the right to meet the request.
Yes.
So those are some of the rights that data subjects have.
And I'm hoping the cost isn't too exorbitant, wherein it basically prevents you from, saying this request isn't worth it.
Well, it's not. The cost is not fixed by the legislation, and so it would depend on the controller that you're dealing with.
Yes.
Another important one, as you mentioned, that is right in relation to what is called the automated processing of personal data. Now, let me break that down simple.
Actually, we're gonna take the break, but we're gonna ask you to stay with us post the break for us to continue.
Thank you.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
32 degrees Celsius here in Kingston as well as in Montego Bay.
Following is a paid announcement by the Jamaica Labour Party.
In our third term, we will double the minimum wage from $16,000, what we have carried it to now, having almost tripled it, to $32,000. In our first budget, the minimum wage will move from $16,000 to $18,500, and then gradually after that for the next few years.
Why you think me love the party, yeah? Put the X beside the belly now.
Preceding was a paid announcement by the Jamaica Labour Party.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are discussing the Data Protection Act with the Information Commissioner, Celia Barclay. Before the break, Ms. Barclay, you were going to break down for us the automated processing and what that means for us as data subjects.
Yes. So we know that things are getting more and more technological, more and more digital. We're using electronic means of dealing with the large volume of information that comes to us as individuals, as businesses. So what you find is that persons are less and less manually reviewing information in order to take decisions. So before, when you made an application, for example, whether it was for a job, for a benefit, for school, you would literally have somebody in an office that sees all of them, looks at all of them, and takes a decision on it. Now we have lots of systems in place to make work easier and faster for everyone and for different business places. So what you find is systems are being put in place to enable those decisions to be taken automatically. So you enter the information, usually online or in a computer that is provided, and there is some software that is being used now to check that information that is entered and to make a decision whether you match certain criteria, right? So you realize that based on what is there, if this decision is being taken, let's call it by a machine has no heart, soul, feeling. It doesn't think about things the same way humans do. So that human element is missing. Imagine if you apply for a benefit, and because this machine has a program that says you need to look for A, B, C, D, E, and the information that you put in does not strictly match that, it might appear that you do not qualify.
Right.
You will now be deprived of this benefit. Well, what the Data Protection Act says is, in these circumstances where decisions are being taken about you by a software, by a system, and it's automated, you have the right to ask that data controller, the person or the company that is utilizing that system, to review your application, your submission, the decision in relation to you, and to determine whether or not that automated processing was properly and effectively done. So when a human reviews it, they can now infuse that heart, that consideration. You might not have satisfied factor D, but there may be some legitimate reason or basis or something that creates an exception, and in relation to that, you would still qualify. So that's the difference that it can make, and that's a right that the Act gives to data subjects to ask for that human element in the review of decisions taken by software.
Great. So as we talk about the rights, if these rights are broken and all of these provisions that we have, if a data controller, a company, an entity were to violate my rights, what are some of the offenses and penalties that are listed in the legislation?
All right. So one of the first offenses is processing information without registering with the IC. That is actually an offense under the Act. And we would like to use this opportunity to just remind our data controllers that you do need to register with our office. If you have not registered, then all that you're doing in terms of processing of personal information is technically unlawful under the Act. So that's the first requirement. Now, the second thing is that there are offenses that can be created just by refusing, as you said, to honor the rights of the data subject. Providing the access that they have a right to under the Act is also an offense. And also in terms of how you process the information, I heard in the intro to this segment, you were talking about the standards under the Act. Now, the Act imposes data protection standards to ensure that information is properly processed or processed according to the law. So a failure to comply with these standards is also an offense under the Act. Now, where these offenses are committed, the treatment and the penalties do vary. So first and foremost, the Act does provide for some of these offenses to be prosecuted through the courts. They are criminal offenses, and so in relation to them, once our enforcement provisions take effect, and I have to give that qualifier because the enforcement provisions are not currently in effect. We're still in a transitioning period to full implementation of the Act, and so it will be sometime before those provisions are specifically brought in when the necessary framework is in place for it. But once those are in effect, there are offences that you can be prosecuted under the law as a criminal offence, and if found guilty or liable, then it can be anywhere from an imprisonment, which may range in terms of period. It could be 6 months, it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, or it could be also a monetary penalty, which can go up to $5 million, depending on what the offence is that has been contravened or has been broken under the law.
Yes. All right, great. So listeners, I hope you're paying attention. In terms of redress for people, is it a case where you make a complaint to the Information Commissioner if you suspect that a right have been breached under the law? What are the redress options or mechanisms?
All right, so there are 2 avenues, and we ask that persons essentially take each in turn. Now, because the law imposes certain compliance requirements on the data controllers, the first point of contact, the first request for a remedy ought rightly to be with and from that data controller. And so if it is that persons have an issue with the processing of their personal data by a particular controller, they really ought to contact the controller, make the issue known. We recommend submitting a complaint in writing so that you have a record to show that you have raised this for the attention of the controller. Now, depending on the type of person or organization you're dealing with, many are required under the law to appoint what we call data protection officers. And one of the obligations or responsibilities of the data protection officer under the Act is actually to assist and facilitate data subjects in the exercise of their rights in relation to that controller who has appointed them. And so persons who feel like some right has been trespassed against or that the data controller is doing something wrong in relation to the processing of their data may contact the data protection officer and have them work with them to have that remedied. Now, if it is a case where you have made your complaint or made contact with the data protection officer or the data controller, you have not received any remedy, any redress, this issue is still outstanding, and certainly you are affected and aggrieved by it, then of course you can take your complaint and issue to our office, in which case we will now seek to act on your behalf in ensuring that you get a response and a remedy from the data controller. And in relation to that, usually we reach out to the data controller to investigate the nature of the complaint, assess whether or not it is legitimate or valid, what steps have they taken to remedy it, or if they have not taken any steps, what challenges they might be experiencing in complying with the request of the data subject. And depending on what the particular situation is, we can give certain directives to the data controller as to how to treat with the situation. But persons also need to be aware, both data subjects and data controllers, that even though the enforcement provisions that would allow for criminal prosecution under the Act are not in, there has always been and still remains a civil remedy that is available to individuals who are affected. And so it is still possible for persons to engage the court and take persons or organizations to court and get a remedy through the court, even outside of criminal proceedings.
Yes, great. Last questions from us, Commissioner. Last question, a couple of weeks ago, we had a show where we discussed the issue of people living with HIV, where their health status, is being shared. And our data here at JFJ, the health information, sometimes it's shared by law enforcement officers, medical and non-medical professionals, but some 70% of the complaints, it's really by family members. You know, unfortunately, a mother who says to the neighbor, that my child is living with HIV, and it's not the nice way that I'm saying it, it is shared. Are there any provisions under the Data Protection Act for a client who would come to JFG and say, listen, my health information has been shared by the police, the healthcare provider, or my family member?
Okay. All right. So we have to distinguish between certain things. And as it relates to the Data Protection Act, the Act specifically treats with processing, and in this particular context, we're talking about disclosure, because disclosure, sharing of information is a form of processing. So the Act deals with that as it relates to, as I mentioned earlier, the provision of goods, services, and conduct of business, whether by persons or organizations. That's a simple way of putting it. Now, you raise the issue of the 70% of disclosures being by, for example, family members or friends with whom the information is shared.
Yes.
Now, the Act does not seek to control or regulate personal relationships. So we have to distinguish between our communication with our family and friends and how that, the implications of that in relation to third parties, and our communication with data controllers as are defined by the Act. Now, it is unfortunate that as it relates to the former, the personal communication between persons that have that type of personal relationship, as I said, that's not regulated by the legislation. However, we do believe that through the enactment and implementation of the Data Protection Act, what we can do as a society is to reinforce and reaffirm that need for recognition of privacy as a right, to have a privacy-conscious society, and in so doing, force persons to think about privacy and confidentiality a lot differently. So if they recognize the importance of it in their business context, we also believe that it can have a sort of domino effect in how they treat their information and the information of others in a personal context. But persons also need to be mindful that there are other legislation that can speak to how that information is used by others. So you mentioned the persons who are suffering from HIV and their status being disclosed. If this results in some kind of discrimination or attack on the person, so for example, everything is online nowadays and persons are quick to run to social media to talk about others. If you find that persons are being, bullied or ill-treated or, accused or any kind of negative comment online, there are provisions that relate to the use of that information and those types of actions based on which persons can still be prosecuted. It just would not be under the Data Protection Act.
Yes. We have a few seconds left, Commissioner. Any last words as we close out?
Yes, certainly. We have always encouraged our data controllers island-wide, regardless of the nature of your business, to be mindful of the rights of data subjects and certainly of your obligations under the Act. But when you talk about Jamaicans for justice, we're talking about justice for all.
Yes.
When you talk about access to justice, it is justice for everybody. It's not just the business people. And so, again, we encourage every individual, me, you, your listeners, the persons with whom they deal with every day, family and friends, take responsibility for your information and its privacy. You have to play a role in ensuring, one, that you yourself protect it as best as possible, but also that other persons are protecting it too. Ask questions, place people on the spot, help us to hold others accountable for what they do with your personal data. And where you don't believe they're treating it properly, then certainly you do have a recourse both to them and to the Office of the Information Commissioner.
Right. Thank you so much. So that was Celia Barkley, the
Information Commissioner in the Office of the Information Commission.
Yes. I appreciate you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Thank you, and thanks again for having me.
All right. So we take the break, and then we pick up with some exciting discussions on the right to education.
Yes, indeed.
Following is a paid announcement by the Jamaica Labour Party.
In our third term, we will double the minimum wage from $16,000, what we have carried it to now, having almost tripled it, to $32,000. In our first budget, the minimum wage will move from $16,000 to $18,500, and then gradually after that for the next few years.
Why you think me love the party, yeah? Put the X beside the belly now.
Preceding was a paid announcement by the Jamaica Labour Party.
It's Monday, get over your blues. Or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The E-Zone is here for you. With the Stinger Honey Bee
and Karim Boyatings
from 3 to 5 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM.
We've got your entertainment news.
Then we want to hear your views. Why you said?
Jump in the mix.
Or the hot seat.
Don't miss our brain busters.
Or the crazy giveaways.
Let's talk fashion.
Send us your outfit of the day. Ooh, cutesy. Very demure.
Are you looking for love?
Come on one of our blind dates. Send your request to EZONE blinddates@gmail.com. That's EZoneblinddates@gmail.com.
And stay tuned for your confessions.
These are my confessions.
Share them with us at EZoneConfessions@yahoo.com. I mean, is this planet Earth?
Is it?
I don't know. Let me check. Either way, it's got a buzz.
And a bugger thing.
Ow! Ow!
Good afternoon and welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We just had such an excellent conversation just now with the Information Commissioner, and I see some troublesome listeners in the YouTube chat. I know you cannot ask for people's personal information, Miss Tam, right? Because remember, the person that you're referencing, they do have a right to privacy. I won't say what Tam on YouTube is making reference to, but she's just being troublesome, right? But just to move on, last week we had a little challenge, and we're going to be having some more because, you know, me love give ready local things them, you know. I'm such a problem to the team.
Of nothing, Miss Jackson.
No, but we have to give ready things and get people excited about the information and so on and geared up, right? Mm-hmm. So the right to education, we understand, it's in our constitution.
Yes.
But it's almost framed like a child rights because it speaks to your right to education at pre and primary levels.
Right.
So you see some gaps there. And what you find is that when it comes to certain rights, what they call social and economic rights, some constitutions, they don't spell it out as much because once you have a constitutional guarantee, it means that the state has an obligation to meet those requirements.
Right, exactly.
All right. So what you find is that, one, some countries like Jamaica opt not to put certain rights in the constitution and make it more of a policy decision or framework, whereas other countries put it in their constitution, but it's more of an aspirational framing. So you can't take the government or the state to court if it is that some things aren't provided because it's more aspirational. And perhaps that is the route that we should be taking as a country. But before we get into the challenge and the specifics thereof, just to say that JFJ, one of our submissions made to, well, not a submission, we just had a document with our position on constitutional reform. And what we're saying is, let's look at South Africa as an example and move or expand the right from just the right at the pre and primary levels to the secondary level, so you have an absolute constitutional guarantee, as well as adult learning. Because again, you realize it is framed almost like a child rights, but we understand that you have low literacy levels among our adult population, and we need to get to a place where 100% of all of us can read and write. Yes. And then thirdly, where it's not a constitutional guarantee, perhaps we should have a framing where there's accessibility of education up to the tertiary level. So that is just a summary of JFJ's proposal to the constitutional reform process. And we made a reference to South Africa as an example that our parliamentarians can look to. So the exciting part now was that when we issued that little challenge, we had 19 respondents in just 3 days.
Yes.
And some of the things, Jill, how they write out, man, it looked like these are attorneys who passed through the process.
These are full legislative proposals.
I tell you, it's like you get some training legislative drafting already because it was so beautifully framed. So we had 19 proposals being submitted. Excellent, all of them, I must say, but you guys narrowed it down to 5 and then the top 2.
Yes, yes, indeed. So it was a panel of judges, listeners. So
a whole panel.
A whole panel. But yes, so we have 2 winners, and I asked Damien to put them up for me. They are Miss Janice White and Lisa Joy. Are the winners of our Right to Education challenge. And you will be able to pick up your prize here at the Nationwide studio on Cargill.
6 Bradley
Avenue. My bad. 6 Bradley Avenue. All right. So I'm going to just give you guys what we were sent. So for Janice, Jamaicans for Justice could propose an amendment to guarantee free access to secondary, tertiary, and vocational education for all citizens. This would include both in-person and digital options to ensure that every Jamaican, regardless of age, income, or location, can continue their education beyond the primary level. The government, in partnership with the private sector and international donors, would be required to invest in this infrastructure, create community learning hubs, and to expand vocational and online training opportunities. And she went on to say that this would be in line with Vision 2030.
You see all the SDG goals and so on, yes?
From Lisa also proposed for Jamaica's constitution to guarantee free and compulsory education up to the secondary level, while also ensuring affordable and equitable access to tertiary and vocational training through state scholarships, loan reform, and support for vulnerable students. This would reduce the right to education. This would expand the right to education beyond primary, reduce inequality, and empower all Jamaicans to reach their full potential. I just want to say, for Janice, I liked that she included the vocational education, and for Lisa, I really liked that she basically had a similar proposal to what we had, in that the right would be guaranteed up to the secondary level, and then the tertiary level we would be considering what options the state could consider.
All right. So those are our 2 winners. I'm sorry, we didn't want to preempt the process by letting you know that you won. But it would be good one day to have some of the respondents perhaps just call in to give an indication of their proposals. And again, it's an election time, not because it's politics, but politics is the route to policy making and having these rights realized. So go read the manifesto them and see if any of these things are in them, yes? and exercise the franchise again.
Sure.
All right. And today's trivia.
Yes, so for today's trivia, we had asked the question, which section of the Data Protection Act establishes the Office of the Information Commissioner? The answer to the question was Section 4 of the Data Protection Act, and this week we actually got a winner from Instagram before YouTube. So Confident Palm on Instagram, we will DM you with your we'll DM you to let you know that you've won. As I said, this week's prize is a bit different, so you'll have to pick up, but we'll let you know. For those who won the Right to Education challenge, you are to pick up your prize at Bradley Avenue. So we'll also put it on our Instagram page.
Yeah. Before we close out, in the few minutes we have left, last week we had an exciting community intervention by Mandela Park that was in partnership with the Access to Information Unit, with funding support from the Commonwealth Foundation around the Access to Information Act. Very, very good intervention where people came, they learned how to utilize the ATI Act. And you remember a few weeks ago, we had Mr. Damian Cox,
yes,
the senior director of the ATI unit here, breaking down the legislation, letting you know what the provisions they are. So just want to encourage listeners, you have a right to know. In the Constitution, it is properly outlined as the right to seek, receive, and disseminate information. That's what the Constitution of Jamaica allows. So exercise the provisions and utilize them as spelled out in the ATI Act. JFJ, what we have done to aid in that process, we have created a platform. It's righttoknowja.com. That's righttoknowja.com. And when you go on that website, what you can do is to simply click. Just you have the text box. Everything is there, and you just indicate I want information, annual report, financial report, expenditure report from this particular agency, whether it be the municipal corporation, whether it be the National Housing Trust. And you indicate what information you desire, and then you would select the agency, and everything would be auto-populated in terms of where the information or the request would there go, and then you click submit. So just be a part of exercising the rights as afforded to you, and follow JFJ on this particular issue. Because we all need to be involved in holding the government to account in terms of ensuring, one, the provisions under the Act, it's being adhered to by the different state agencies and bodies. And then two, we have been promised the review and amendment of this piece of legislation. Passed in 2002, we had a review process in 2011. Even though the law, I believe it calls for review every 2 years.
Right, yeah.
2011, you're talking about what, 23 years thereafter? Am I getting my maths correct or no? It's not 2025.
Yes.
Yeah? So it needs to be reviewed. All right?
All right. So thank you all for joining us on this episode of Let's Talk Justice. My name is Jade Williams.
My name is Mikkel Jackson. Walk good and be safe. Sports day on Wednesday. So be safe out there. All right? Have a good day.
Jamaicans, by justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under law. Justice, Jamaica the known. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities, no to unlawful detention and police brutalization, class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
Jamaica's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.3%, down from 13.2% in 2016. Our government's continued focus on job creation is delivering real results. We are building Jamaica. The time by the Office of the Prime Minister is
2:00.
Following is a paid announcement by the Jamaica Labour Party.
In our third term, we will double the minimum wage from $16,000, what we have carried it to now, having almost tripled it, to $32,000. In our first budget, the minimum wage will move from $16,000 to $18,500, and then gradually after that for the next few years.
Why you think me love the party, yeah? Put the X beside the belly now.
Preceding was a paid announcement by the Jamaica Labour Party.
Ever wondered how to